Moving to our top story today, well, he's been a thorn in the deputy president's side for the longest time now. He's one of our investigative journalists and the esteemed author of his latest book, of course, Mafia Land. He's Kyle Cowan, and he's live from our Randburg studios. How's it, Kyle? How are you doing? Welcome to The Lead in 2026. How's the book doing?
Book is doing very well, Graham. Thank you. And as always, thank you for inviting me on. It's always a great pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Okay. If our News 24 cast of thousands thinks the Mashatile dynasty saga is over, they're wrong, right? In today's front page exclusive, it's now emerged, and we've confirmed it, that a company linked to Paul Mashatile's son, Tabiso, which is this company's prior known as Modepadi Nokaneng, may no longer do business with the state. How so?
Yeah, they have been removed from something called the Central Supplier Database. So anyone who has ever done business with government will know that your company or your sole proprietorship or your private entity or whatever has to be registered with the Central Supplier Database. So effectively a database managed by National Treasury. You upload all your company documents proving that you do exist, your FICA documents, etc., and things like tax clearance certificates, etc. If you are not on this list, it is a basic sort of requirement. It's a box that has to be ticked whenever you submit, any sort of public procurement tender, anything like that. If you're not on there, simply put, you cannot do business with any public entity anywhere in the Republic.
Right. That company's also changed its name as of late last year, and there was also, of course, this hefty tax slap that we've also briefly spoken about before, right? I think it's more than $3 million that this company
That's
owes
right.
the tax person, the tax man.
Yes. So SARS obtained a default judgment against Modipadi Nokaneng for just over 3 million rand in unpaid taxes. We as because of the nature of tax information, we obviously don't know what exactly that's for, but you can obviously guess that SARS thinks that this company owes it more than it has paid over to SARS, which is normally quite a big problem. If anyone has ever dealt with SARS before, they can be quite difficult to convince of your version of events. So that there's that, and then the name change, I think, it's an interesting one. The company is now called 0711 Stuttgart. Now, Stuttgart is a city in Germany. 0711 is the telephone code for that particular part of Germany. So it's an interesting name change. I think,
Very,
and
very
this is
peculiar.
if I may make an educated guess, I think that the name Modipadi Nokaneng, through the coverage of News 24 and our sister publication Netwerk 24, has received quite a lot of negative press attention. We've written about government contracts, issues around payments of workers that have been laid off, etc. And I think that this is nothing more than a simple attempt to try and sort of divert attention away from that negative publishing. Because, of course, if you Google the new name 0711 Stuttgart, you are going to come up with a whole lot of posts from people on social media talking about Stuttgart or Stuttgart the town, etc. So it's never really going to lead you back to them.
Yeah, maybe it's a nod to Stuttgart FC. The naive side of me maybe thinks it could be that. There could be a bunch of football fans, German football fans, amongst the Mashatile family. How does Tabiso's, this linked company, and Ngwato and Manzi Group fit into the overall saga thus far? Once upon a time, these two entities were the only two that bagged this huge Gauteng tender in relation to both the health department and the infrastructure development department. Just remind us, Kyle, again, what that tender was about, what that was meant for in terms of that procurement.
Yeah, so what's very important to remember here is that Paul Mashatile's sons, Tabiso Mashatile and another son called Tiniko Mvelase, were involved with a company, as you mentioned, in Ngwato and Manzi Group. This company, Modipadi Nokaneng or Stuttgart, they were very, very closely linked together. They shared office space, they shared staff. They were one and the same entity for several years, dealing with these contracts. In 2022, these two companies, and only these two companies, were placed on a panel by the Gauteng Department of Infrastructure Development to service and repair fire suppression and detection systems at public health facilities in Gauteng. That's hospitals, clinics, etc. That contract, at the end of the day, is worth to these companies in the region of 90 million rand. It took us quite a long time to get to the bottom of that because the figures that were coming out from the Department of Infrastructure Development, initially it was 20, then it was 40, then it was 90. So these companies undertook those contracts. And we've done quite a lot of reporting on just trying to understand exactly what the services were that were provided. At one point, it emerged that one of the invoices filed by one of the companies was for a fax machine that was provided to a mortuary in Pretoria. I'm not sure, well, with the South African government, anything is possible. They may still be working on faxes. I certainly don't know of anyone who still
I
uses a
mean,
fax machine.
a dying
But
technology gets sent to a mortuary. I mean, the irony is not lost on us, eh?
yeah, so I suppose that fax machine is very important to that mortuary, but again, this sort of falls outside the ambit of fire suppression and detection systems, unless the old printer was the reason why the fire suppression systems weren't working at that mortuary. I can't imagine that it could be in any way, and I don't mean to sound facetious, but the point I'm trying to make is that there's obvious clues that they were getting paid money for things that were outside of the ambit of this contract, and the moment journalists started asking very difficult questions about these contracts, it looks like the department sort of stepped back and said, well, we can't allow this to continue. Another panel was constituted, which they were not then part of, to provide these services. But getting information about what was paid for how much and when exactly has been extremely difficult.
All of this, the subject of which, if anyone's forgotten, is the subject of a probe undertaken by the Public Protector. Numerous calls had asked for the Public Protector's office to get involved here. We know that millions have been already issued to these companies, but as the sort of tenders became more inflated in terms of their value over time, there's still an outstanding, quite vast outstanding amounts that didn't reach these two particular companies in the end, right?
Yeah, so my understanding, and again, this is based on figures being provided to us, you know, like extracting teeth by these government departments. I would take this all with a pinch of salt. I think that, reporting, we also point out that, in the past, they haven't entirely been accurate and upfront about these amounts. But in the region of, I think, 20 million rand is still owed. That is the claimed amounts and invoices that still need to be processed, etc. Again, unfortunately, we don't know exactly what that is for, but this would have been owed to Modipadi Nokaneng, the same entity that has, got into trouble with SARS, that has now also been suspended from the central supplier database. So there are a lot of questions around this company and the way that it's conducted its business that we will have to try and answer, and we have been trying to answer. It's just been proving quite difficult to get access to info.
Yes, and of course, our colleague Azara Karim, which has rejoined the News 24 investigative journalism team, is going to do a lot of work at that. What do we know about what it takes to have one's company removed from the central database? It would probably elicit a strong response because only National Treasury has that power to do so. It would obviously can't just happen overnight. Treasury would have to do its own sort of internal look-see to see what the parameters are for a strong measure like this, because getting onto the database to begin with, one would argue in any nation state, is a rather difficult thing.
Well, in South Africa, surprisingly not that difficult. So you don't have to have any track record of having delivered any projects in the past. Literally, it's the same as opening a bank account. Your registration with the CSD, you have to provide documents, the ID documents of the directors, the SIPC document showing that the company is duly registered, a tax clearance certificate, things like that. That's all you need to provide to be registered on the database. So there could be a number of reasons why this company has been removed. We've asked National Treasury to sort of explain it to us. We're hoping that they will get back to us and say, well, this is reason X, reason Y. This is, someone asked us to do this, etc. But non-compliance issues, not having a active tax clearance, which I think in this case could be likely because we know that there is a tax judgment. We don't know if they've resolved that issue, if they've paid SARS, if SARS has now, issued them with a new tax clearance certificate. If you don't have that, your registration will lapse. But it's an interesting one because I'm not aware of any case where the central supplier database automatically suspends a supplier. So there must have been some kind of intervention from an individual. There
Yeah.
must have been an recommendation or a request to particularly to remove this company. Bearing in mind, they could have removed themselves from the central supply database. We're just
Sure.
not sure at this stage. We're hoping that National Treasury will be able to enlighten us. I suspect, and again, I don't know, but I suspect it has something to do with their tax clearance certificate.
And it's not as if our teams have not been trying to get hold of all the Mashatiles in question for any comment on in black and white in our reporting. I mean, they've just not been forthcoming. And where does this all leave the Inwato and Manzi group?
So the Ngwatu and Munzi group, as far as I know, is still operational. It is still going. It's still registered on the CSD. The directors have obviously changed, and between these two companies, the directors have changed multiple times over many years. In my view, it was an attempt to try and avoid some form of scrutiny. At the moment, Ngwatu and Manzi Group's only director is an old school friend of Tanuko and Velasquez. They were a couple of years apart in high school. But as far as we're aware, as a result of the investigation, and then obviously steps also taken by the Gauteng Department of Infrastructure Development, I do not think that entity is active. My understanding is that they laid off, between the two companies, they laid off workers that had been employed by one or the other company, more than a year ago. Those workers are owed severance packages. They have not been paid. In my view, I think these two companies are in severe financial distress, and not currently operating with any active government contracts. For example, the fire suppression contract lapsed in November of last year. So it's an interesting one. We're going to obviously continue to try and dig to try and understand exactly what is happening. And it's very important, and this is something that our viewers must remember, none of this prohibits them from doing business in the private sector, or being subcontracted to another company that is doing business with government. So
Yeah.
there's a couple of avenues that we're chasing, and we're hoping to try and understand exactly what they're up to, because the past evidence suggests that whatever money is going in there, we need to be taking a very close look at.
Absolutely. Our taxpayers' money. What do you say to those listening that feel like News 24 has this, politically charged tirade or unnecessary bone to pick with the deputy president? We've been accused of that in the past.
Mm.
Whilst in the same breath, we've also had people on the other side of the curtain accusing us of not coming down hard enough on the ANC, or being too ANC aligned. I guess we're doing our jobs, right, Carl?
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. To be honest, the criticism in some cases is valid. In this case, it is not valid, and I'll say that for one very simple reason: if the ANC maintains any semblance of control over governance after our next couple of elections, being municipal and national, coming up, and then we have an elective conference with the ANC coming up, Paul Mashatile is going to most likely take over leadership of the ANC party. Leadership of the ANC party normally in the past has equated to leadership of the country. When we started looking at Paul Mashatile and his friends and his family, it was very clear that he was going to succeed Cyril Ramaphosa. Political developments may change that, but we feel it is our duty to understand every facet of the lives of people who are going to have such extreme power and influence over the currently still the biggest political party in the country. So to those critics, we say, you'll thank us one day when, or if Mr. Paul Mashatile does become president, and you then know about him and his family already. It won't come as a surprise to you that he owns or lives in, 60 million rand mansions in Waterfall and Constantia down in the Cape. It will not come as a surprise to you when his sons, obtain more government contracts, because we would have told you about it already and warned you about it already. So, yes, I think that it's a difficult task. We have to balance accountability with fairness. And in this case, the position that Mr. Mashatile holds as deputy president means that we are perfectly within, the bounds of public interest, and in fact have a duty to report on his financial doings and the financial doings of his family members.
Yeah, because if we look at the history of South Africa in space of time, when it comes down to politics, nepotism's never been that far out of reach. When it comes to
Correct.
all of the biggest scandals that we've seen during the apartheid years, over the last 100 years or so. Let's end here. Municipal elections are finally upon us. It's
Mm.
a heavy political year. And on that note of the Constantia Mansion, which in fact the deputy president told parliamentarians was he declared it as it being his, although
Mm.
we know that it's a family member's.
Yeah.
Whatever gets put in black and white, I think, is also quite binding, isn't it, Carl? But here's
Yeah.
Mashatile came out in October, and our colleague Jan Gaber reported on his remarks here. But Mashatile criticized at the time the Western Cape municipal model, of course, the DA's
Mm.
stronghold, claiming that inequality is quite bad here. And of course, this was in response to the president's remarks about
Mhm.
how governance is better within the Cape Town Metro. I just thought,
Yeah.
I mean, those remarks in
It's ironic.
response. Fact,
It's
it's
ironic.
very, I mean, come on. We're moving to such important elections. I think these contextual matters are going to be very important to have at the frontal lobe as we move to the
Yeah.
ballot boxes, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think if we understand the context of what's going on, the ANC knows it's in trouble. Excuse me. Other parties are circling, blood is in the water. And comments like that by Mr. Mashatile to try and cast doubt on the single biggest opposition party in terms of outright voting numbers, in trying to make them out to be anti-poor, to be to have exclusionary policies even though they may not be written down, etc. It is a very age-old political tactic to try and say, oh yes, but never mind about me, what about them? And I think part of what we are trying to do is to try and show up these sort of issues, to say, yes, Paul Mashatile might be criticizing the Western Cape, but he definitely loves to spend time there in his 28 million rand house, which is something that a lot of people say to me, oh, well, he's allowed to own a property. He's allowed to have a bit of money. And I said, yeah, sure, he is. I'm also allowed to question it. So at the same time, while you're listening to politicians as they ramp up the rhetoric and the invective over the coming months, just always remember to take a step back and remember the history. Politicians rely on us having collective short-term memories because of the absolute glut of information that is out there. Take a step back. Remember, this is the same party that brought us state capture. This is the same party that gave us Jacob Zuma for so many years. This is the same party that gave us Cyril Ramaphosa. Let's not, make this an anti-ANC thing, but understand that promises are often empty. And if you want good, solid, factual information to base your decisions off of, visit websites like News24. Look at our investigative reporting. Look at what we've uncovered. Don't fall into the trap of only questioning the motives. Engage with the content. Engage with the content, and then you will see why these stories exist. If you actually just read past the headlines, you'll start to understand that this is about far more than just one municipal election or one public statement. It is about the future of this country.